Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The world was not what it once was. Time had worn away at the ancient landscapes, leaving behind a tapestry of myths and forgotten legends. Among these tales, none was more captivating than that of the Lake of Immortality, said to lie at the very edge of the world, where the known lands met the great, uncharted wilderness. The lake's waters, it was whispered, held the power to grant eternal life to those brave enough to find it. Many had tried, and many had failed, lost to the perils of the journey or consumed by the lake's rumored guardians. But none of this deterred Alice, a seasoned swordsman, from setting out on her quest. Alice had seen more of the world than most, her travels taking her from the burning deserts of the south to the frozen peaks of the north. She was no stranger to hardship, and her body bore the marks of countless battles, scars that told stories of victories hard won and losses deeply felt. But it was not the desire for glory that drove her now, it was something far more personal. The loss of those she loved, the cruel hand of fate that had snatched them away, had left her with a singular purpose, to conquer death itself. Her journey had been long and treacherous. The forest that guarded the lake was dense and dark, its towering trees blotting out the sun, casting the land in perpetual twilight. The path was scarcely visible, overgrown with thorns and roots that seemed to reach out, tripping the unwary. But Alice was no novice. With every step, she moved with the grace of one who had spent a lifetime honing her skills. Her sword, a trusted companion, cut through the underbrush as she made her way forward, her eyes scanning for any sign of danger. She had heard tales of the beasts that lurked in these woods, creatures of nightmare that preyed on those who dared to venture too close to the lake. Yet, as she journeyed deeper, she encountered nothing but silence. It was an eerie, unsettling quiet that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The only sound was the soft crunch of leaves beneath her boots, the rustle of the wind in the trees. She pressed on, her heart beating steadily in her chest, determined to reach her goal. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the trees began to thin, and the ground leveled out. The forest opened up, revealing a sight that took her breath away. There, nestled in a small, secluded valley, lay the Lake of Immortality. It was more beautiful than she could have imagined. The water was still, like a mirror reflecting the sky above, which had turned a deep, twilight blue. The air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and earth. The lake seemed to radiate a soft, ethereal glow, as if it were not entirely of this world. Alice stood at the water's edge, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had made it. After all the trials, all the sacrifices, she had found the lake. She knelt down, her hand trembling as she reached for the flask at her side. She could feel the weight of the moment, the culmination of her life's journey. The water was within her reach, immortality was within her grasp, but as her fingers brushed the surface of the lake, she felt a presence behind her. She froze, her senses heightened, every muscle tensed for action. Slowly, she rose to her feet and turned to face whoever, or whatever, was behind her. Standing a few paces away was an old man, his long, white beard flowing down to his chest, his robes tattered and worn from years of travel. He leaned heavily on a wooden staff, his eyes, sharp and piercing despite his age, fixed on Alice. There was a familiarity in his gaze, as if he knew her, though she was certain they had never met. "Who are you?" Alice demanded, her hand instinctively gripping the hilt of her sword. The old man smiled, a weary, knowing smile. "I am Eldrin," he said, his voice soft but steady. "And I see you found what we both seek." Alice's eyes narrowed. "The lake is mine. I've come too far to be turned away now." Eldrin nodded slowly, as if he understood her resolve. I do not seek to take it from you, young one. But perhaps, we might share it, in a manner of speaking. Alice didn't relax her stance. Why would I share it with you? What do you know of this place? Eldrin sighed, his gaze shifting to the lake. More than you might think, he replied. I have spent many years searching for this place, just as you have. But now that I am here, I find myself hesitant. Hesitant? Alice scoffed. Why hesitate? This is the lake of immortality. With it, you could live forever, free from the chains of time. And what would you do with that time? Eldrin asked, his eyes returning to hers. Alice hesitated, her grip on the sword loosening just slightly. I would live. I would see the world, continue my journey. I would no longer have to fear losing the people I care about. Eldrin nodded again, as if he had expected this answer. And what of the people who come after you? Would you watch them grow old and die while you remain unchanged? Alice's jaw tightened. She had not allowed herself to think that far ahead. The idea of living without the fear of death had been her sole focus. But now, faced with the reality of what that might mean, she found herself uncertain. What are you saying? She asked, her voice softer, less certain. Eldrin stepped closer, his gaze intense. I am saying that immortality is not the gift it appears to be. It is a burden, a heavy one. To live forever is to watch the world change around you, to see those you love pass on while you remain. It is to be alone, always. Alice shook her head. But there must be some way to avoid that fate. Perhaps, Eldrin said, but it is a rare person who can carry that burden without being crushed by it. I have lived a long life, Alice. I have seen the rise and fall of kingdoms, the birth and death of countless lives. And in all that time, I have come to understand that it is not the length of life that matters, but what you do with the time you have. Alice was silent, her thoughts churning. She had spent so long seeking this lake, driven by the desire to escape the pain of loss, to defy the inevitability of death. But now, standing here with the lake before her, she found herself questioning everything. Was immortality truly worth it? Could she bear the weight of endless time? What would you do? She asked quietly, looking at Eldrin. The old man smiled, a gentle, sad smile. I would drink, he said, but not for myself. I would drink for those who cannot. I would take this gift and use it to pass on what I have learned, to ensure that my knowledge does not die with me. But even then, I wonder if it would be enough. Alice looked back at the lake, its surface as smooth and still as glass. She could see her reflection in the water, tired, scarred, but strong. She had come so far, endured so much. But was this truly the answer? Eldrin stepped up beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. The choice is yours, Alice. No one can make it for you. But know this, whatever you choose, it will shape the rest of your life, whether that life is long or short. Alice closed her eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She could feel the pull of the lake, the promise of eternal life just within her reach. But she could also feel the truth in Eldrin's words, the wisdom of his years. Immortality was not a simple gift, it was a burden, a responsibility. She opened her eyes and looked at Eldrin. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice trembling. Eldrin nodded, understanding. It is not an easy choice. But you are strong, Alice. Stronger than you know. Whatever you decide, I believe you will find the right path. Alice took a deep breath, her hand reaching for the flask at her side. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered it into the water. The flask filled quickly, the water cool and clear. She lifted it out and held it in her hands, feeling its weight. Eldrin watched her, his expression unreadable. "What will you do?" Alice looked at the flask, then at the lake, and finally back at Eldrin. "I'll drink," she said, her voice firm. "But not for myself." Eldrin's eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing as Alice raised the flask to her lips. She took a small sip, just enough to taste the water. It was cool and refreshing, but there was something else, something she couldn't quite describe, a sense of peace, of clarity. She lowered the flask and handed it to Eldrin. "Take it," she said. "Use it as you see fit. But know that I won't drink any more. I've made my choice." Eldrin accepted the flask, his expression thoughtful. "You are a wise woman, Alice. Wiser than many who have sought this lake." Alice smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of running." Eldrin nodded, his gaze returning to the lake. "And what will you do now?" "I'll live," Alice said simply. "I'll live with the time I have left. And I'll make it count." Eldrin smiled, a look of approval in his eyes. "That is all any of us can do." Alice turned away from the lake, her mind made up. She had found what she had come for, but it was not what she had expected. The lake had not granted her the immortality she had sought, but it had given her something far more valuable, a new perspective, a sense of peace. As she walked away, she felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She knew that she would carry the memory of this place with her, but she no longer felt the need to cling to it. Life was meant to be lived, not endured. And she would live it, with all the time she had left. Eldrin watched her go, the flask still in his hand. He looked down at the water inside, then at the lake. For a long moment, he stood there, deep in thought. Finally, he sighed and lowered the flask into the water, letting it fill completely. He lifted it out and took a long, slow drink, his eyes closing as the water coursed through him. When he opened his eyes, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had made his choice, just as Alice had made hers. The lake had given them both what they needed, in its own way. And now, it was time for him to fulfill his final task. With a determined expression, Eldrin turned and walked away from the lake, the flask clutched tightly in his hand. He would find a worthy apprentice, someone who could carry on his legacy. He would pass on his knowledge, his wisdom, to the next generation. And in that way, he would live on, through his teachings, through the lives he touched. The lake remained behind, still and silent, a testament to the power of choice, to the mysteries of life and death. It had claimed many who sought its secrets, but it had also granted something far greater to those who understood its true nature. Immortality was not about living forever, it was about the legacy one left behind, the impact one had on the world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in shades of gold and crimson, Alice and Eldrin walked their separate paths, each carrying the lessons of the lake with them. And though their journeys had only just begun, they both knew that they had already found what they were truly searching for. In the end, it was not the lake that granted immortality, but the choices made by those who found it. And in those choices, they had found the true meaning of life. As Alice walked away from the lake, the soft crunch of leaves under her boots was the only sound that accompanied her. The forest, once ominous and foreboding, now felt peaceful, as if it too had found a sense of tranquility in the wake of her decision. The twilight sky above had deepened, stars beginning to peek through the veil of dusk. She breathed in the cool, crisp air, her mind surprisingly clear, free from the doubts and fears that had plagued her for so long. For the first time in years, Alice felt a sense of calm settle over her. The relentless pursuit of the lake had driven her for so long that she had nearly forgotten what it meant to simply be. Now, with that goal behind her, she could see the path ahead with fresh eyes. There was no longer a need to chase after something elusive, no need to fight against the inevitable. She had chosen to live, and that choice had given her a renewed purpose. Her thoughts turned to Eldrin, the old wizard who had shared the lake's secret with her. She wondered what path he would take now that he, too, had made his choice. There was a quiet strength in him, a wisdom that came from years of experience. She respected him, perhaps even admired him, for the courage it took to face the lake and walk away with more than just immortality. Alice knew she would never see him again. His journey was his own, just as hers was, but she carried with her the words they had shared, the insights they had uncovered together. Those words would guide her, she knew, as she continued to navigate the uncertainties of life. The forest slowly began to thin, the dense trees giving way to more open terrain. The path ahead became clearer, the underbrush less tangled, as if the forest itself was guiding her toward her next destination. Alice had no clear plan, no specific place to go, but that no longer troubled her. She would let the journey unfold as it would, trusting in herself and the choices she had made. As she walked, she thought back to the countless battles she had fought, the lives she had taken, and the lives she had lost. The memories were still there, still vivid, but they no longer held the same weight. She had learned to let go, to accept that the past was unchangeable and that the future was hers to shape. It was a lesson hard-earned, but one that had brought her to this moment, to this path. The night deepened, and the stars above grew brighter, their light guiding her steps. The world was quiet, save for the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Alice found comfort in the solitude, in the peace that came with being alone with her thoughts. She knew she would encounter others on her journey, perhaps even new companions, but for now, she relished the silence, the time to reflect on all that had transpired. The journey had always been about more than just finding the lake. It had been about finding herself, about coming to terms with the pain and loss that had shaped her into the warrior she had become. The lake had not given her immortality, but it had given her something far more valuable, the understanding that life was precious precisely because it was finite. Alice continued walking, her pace steady, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The road ahead was unknown, but it no longer filled her with fear or anxiety. Instead, she welcomed the uncertainty, knowing that whatever came next, she was ready to face it. She had faced the lake, and in doing so, had faced herself. That was the true gift the lake had given her, the courage to live her life fully, without regrets. As dawn began to break on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, Alice paused to take in the beauty of the morning. The world was waking up around her, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. It was a new day, a new beginning, and Alice felt a deep sense of gratitude for the chance to experience it. She resumed her journey, the sun rising behind her, casting her shadow long on the path ahead. The road was still uncertain, but Alice was no longer alone in her quest. She carried with her the lessons of the lake, the wisdom of Eldrin, and the strength that had always been within her. The path would take her where it would, and she would follow it with confidence, with resolve, and with the knowledge that she had made the right choice. The lake was behind her now, but its memory would stay with her, a quiet reminder of the power of choice, the importance of living each day fully. Alice walked on, her heart light, her mind clear, ready for whatever lay ahead.